Jade sat at her kitchen table, early morning light filtering through the sheer curtains, illuminating her half-finished sketch. She touched her pencil to paper, then hesitated, her fingers trembling. For as long as she could remember, she'd found solace in creativity, spending hours alone in her cramped but cozy art studio, painting and drawing while the rest of her high school classmates went to football games, parties, and school dances. Now, in her early 20s, Jade supported herself by selling modest paintings online and doing an occasional commissioned piece for local businesses. Though she loved painting, something gnawed at her. The fear that her work was never good enough, that she didn't have the courage to share it with a wider audience. Sighing, she stood and went to pick up the pastel-hued jar of brushes near the sink. She liked everything about painting except the moment people's eyes fell on her artwork, and more worryingly, on her. Jade had always been shy, quiet, easily overlooked. She had no illusions that her path would be easy. She'd grown used to the swirling anxiety that accompanied any moment that threatened to reveal something of her private world. Nevertheless, a flicker of determination still resided deep within her. Sometimes she imagined painting on a grand scale, something that would make people feel less alone or more hopeful. But how could she ever muster the courage to do that when she could hardly bear to speak her mind in front of a small audience? A gentle knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Peering through the peephole, she saw Miss Frances, her next-door neighbor, a kind, older lady who often took walks at dawn. Jade let her in, greeting her with a polite, almost whispered hello. Miss Frances offered a warm smile and pointed to the half-finished painting on the table, featuring a young girl in a field of poppies extending a hand to a wounded bird. "That's beautiful, dear," Miss Frances said, admiration shining in her eyes. "I notice your works often have gentle acts of caring in them. Don't hold them back from the world." Jade gave a small shrug, a flutter of warmth in her chest. Compliments always felt good, but they didn't erase her uncertainty. The fear of public commentary, the anxiety about whether she had anything worth offering, those were real difficulties. Still, she thanked Miss Frances politely. Later that day, Jade cleared her schedule to focus on the painting. She imagined a scenario extending beyond her canvas. The girl in the field helped the wounded bird, which flew away happily, free once more. Maybe at the far edge of the field, another act of kindness was taking place. Someone giving water to a thirsty traveler, or a child rescuing a small animal. That night, she went to bed envisioning an entire scene of small but powerful kindnesses, the kind that could knit broken hearts back together if given the chance. Little did she know, her imagination was about to take on a life of its own, and it would soon begin to reshape her small community. In the days that followed, Jade found herself increasingly fixated on the idea of bringing that field of kindness to life beyond her brushes on canvas. She thought of the drab walls around town, industrial back alleys, forgotten corners and bland areas along old retail strip malls. Could they be her new canvas? The very idea made her breath catch in her throat. Painting a mural in public meant exposing herself. People would see her physically making it. They'd comment. They would ask her questions, or worse, they might criticize her or mock her for being naive. She tried to recall why she had chosen painting in the first place. It was the language her heart spoke best, a gentle language, one that told the stories of compassion, subtle courage, and reluctant hope. Maybe the world needed more of that now. Every time she turned on the television or scrolled through news websites, she saw articles brimming with angry voices, bitterness, and division, stories that eroded her faith in humanity. Yet she also saw small glimpses of light: volunteers feeding the homeless, strangers helping families in need, teachers going the extra mile to inspire students. The trick, she realized, was to highlight these moments to show kindness in its grandest, most colorful form. One night, after weeks of thinking and rethinking, she armed herself with a box of spray paints and brushes and quietly headed behind an old grocery near her apartment. She knew the store owner slightly and had discovered the back wall was rarely patrolled or used. The moon provided faint light, just enough to help her outline the shape of two pairs of hands reaching out to each other. Her heart pounded with fear and excitement, her palms slick with sweat. Every shred of her introverted self was screaming that this was too bold, too vulnerable. But she reminded herself of a single truth. If she couldn't find the courage to act, she would remain stuck in her old patterns. She worked swiftly, intentionally, losing track of time until she had created a simple scene on the wall: two outstretched hands, and above them, a fluttering bird taking flight. The colors glowed softly under the street lamp, sky blues and warm reds, an echo of her dream painting. Before she could let panic overtake her, she gathered her tools and rushed back to her apartment. Even though she'd just made a statement in public, she felt oddly calm, contentment settling over her. She had left a small piece of her heart out there on that worn brick wall, and it hadn't shattered her. When morning came, Jade forced herself out of bed and, in an adrenaline-fueled haze, decided to walk past the grocery store to glimpse her creation in the daylight. First, she peered around the corner, scanning to see if anyone was watching. But there were only a few locals, arms filled with grocery bags, rushing by on midday errands. She inched closer and saw the mural's true colors illuminated by the sun. It was more vibrant than she ever expected. Her heart fluttered in her chest. Eventually, a customer who was walking by stopped, an older man with thinning gray hair. He angled his head as though trying to understand the painting. Jade froze, half expecting him to call the cops or scold her. Instead, he frowned slightly, then touched his heart and nodded like he understood something. He looked around, hoping to catch a glimpse of the artist, perhaps, but she had already hidden herself behind a dumpster, heart pounding. His reaction was so genuine, even from a distance. Relief and hope mingled inside her. Over the following weeks, similar murals of kindness began appearing in tucked-away corners of town. An image of two kids sharing a bicycle on an old bus stop bench, a collection of flowers with a quote about compassion near the library's side entrance, and a series of small birds perched on a giant hand, scrawled on a discolored, abandoned billboard. Each piece was done late at night, one small step leading to another, guided by Jade's unwavering desire to brighten her city's atmosphere. With each new mural, she found the creative energy inside her growing, overshadowing her fear. But at the same time, she realized this was no longer a purely solitary endeavor. People had begun to notice. Slowly, a shared curiosity spread among residents. "Have you seen the new paintings popping up all over town?" someone would ask on a local forum. "They're so beautiful. Anyone know who the mysterious artist is?" The mayor's office even posted photos on social media, praising whoever was behind the project for highlighting kindness and compassion in a most unique way. Jade followed these discussions silently, her cheeks flushed, unsure if she should take pride or run and hide. She noted that the vast majority of comments were positive, but every so often, someone posted something cynical. "They're just graffiti," or "Why not do something more practical?" She tried not to let the negativity sink in, but it was a constant struggle. One morning, Jade headed to a small cafe near the art supply store. As she waited in line, she overheard two elderly women discussing the murals. "I heard the city council might try to find the artist and commission a bigger piece," one of them said, stirring her coffee. "I hope so. They're just lovely." The rest of their conversation blurred in Jade's mind, replaced by a swirl of hope, fear, and speculation. Would she ever dare to paint something that large and stand by it proudly as her own work? She thought of how her lungs seized up when Ms. Francis first complimented her small painting. That was private. A mural commissioned by the city would be an entirely different level of exposure. Yet despite her self-doubts, she felt compelled to keep painting. One night, she pushed herself to select a spot in a more open location. She found a wide wall near the local park where families gathered in the afternoons and early evenings. She chose a time well past midnight, suspecting no one would be around. Once there, she began painting with a fierce determination, conjuring a scene of neighbors helping neighbors. A woman holding groceries for an older gentleman, a child offering a flower to a friend looking sad, and in the center, a large open heart radiating gentle colors. Jade poured every ounce of compassion she had into that mural. She even found herself humming a melody as she worked, the dark park behind her strangely comforting, like a quiet ally. But before she finished, headlights swept across her path, freezing her to the spot. A security guard emerged from his vehicle, shining a flashlight in her direction. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She could almost feel the walls of her courage crashing down. This was the moment she had dreaded: confrontation, possibly punishment. She considered grabbing her paints and running. Instead, she stood motionless, brush in hand. Before she could speak, the guard said softly, "You're the one painting all these, aren't you?" Heart hammering, she croaked, "Yes." He paused, and she noticed gentle curiosity in his face. "Listen," he said after a moment, "I should technically report this as vandalism." He paused again, took another look at her half-finished mural, "But I'm not going to. These paintings have given people something to talk about, something better than the usual gloom. Just promise me you have permission next time." Jade let out a shaky exhale. I will," she managed. He nodded, gave a last glance at the mural, then tipped his hat. "Have a good night." Feeling like she had just stepped off a roller coaster, Jade stood there for several minutes before daring to move. A swirl of conflicting emotions overcame her. Gratitude that she hadn't been arrested, guilt for painting without permission, relief that even a security guard appreciated her art enough to look the other way. Perhaps this entire mission demanded something bolder, a willingness to let people know who she really was. Could she handle that? In the following days, Jade anxiously reviewed the city's formal process for public art. She read about mural proposals, necessary permits, and the requirement to present a concept before a committee. It felt overwhelming. Nevertheless, she set up a meeting, heart pounding with every email she sent. A few days later, she found herself standing in front of the Cultural Arts Committee, a group of older men and women who flipped through her portfolio. Ms. Francis had come as moral support, giving Jade's trembling arm a comforting squeeze. Jade showed sketches of possible mural concepts, images of neighbors helping each other, whimsical designs of children and animals sharing small acts of kindness. She spoke quietly but with conviction, telling them how she believed in the power of art to inspire empathy. She mentioned how her father used to say, "A single act of kindness can ripple in ways we can't even imagine." That was the heart of her motivation. As she spoke, Jade found her voice growing more confident. For what felt like ages, the committee members silently conferred amongst themselves. Then they gave her cautious nods and smiles. "Ooh, we'd like to see your work on the side of the community center," one member stated. "We appreciate your vision and we'd be proud to commission a mural promoting kindness. Um, if it's anything like these sketches, it'll be well worth it." Jade let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding, tears pricking at the corners of her eyes. She had done it, at least. She'd taken the first big public step. She thanked them, accepted a thick stack of paperwork about the official process, and left the chamber with Miss Francis, who clapped her hands in delight. Word spread, and soon Jade's world began to shift. No longer would she be an anonymous figure, slipping quietly through back alleys. Now she stood at the center of a small but important spotlight. Local newspapers requested quick interviews, praising the mysterious muralist turned community collaborator. People started emailing her about painting smaller murals on their own walls, coffee shops, daycare centers, homeless shelters. She was swept up in a wave of possibility, both thrilling and terrifying. She still felt that old knot of anxiety whenever she presented herself in front of strangers, but something else, a sense of purpose, was beginning to overshadow her fear. On the day she arrived to start the community center mural, 3 volunteers had come to help. She blinked in surprise at the sight of them waiting outside. Miss Francis, the security guard from the park, and that older man with the thinning gray hair who had first admired her painting behind the grocery store. He introduced himself as Al, a retired teacher. Each had a reason for assisting. Miss Francis simply wanted to support her neighbor. The guard, whose name was Ross, admitted that he had been deeply touched by Jade's creations and wanted to help her spread that warmth. Al said he used to teach art before budget cuts took away funding for the program, and he missed the creativity that bright murals brought into children's lives. Heart full, Jade guided them in applying the base coats. As they painted across the large wall, families entered and exited the community center, pausing to look at the bright swirls of color forming a scene of friendly neighbors, children planting a garden, and a banner that read, "Kindness grows community." Occasionally, passersby asked about Jade's vision or shared personal stories of small acts of kindness they had witnessed or experienced. The conversation around them was lively, open, curious. Instead of cringing at the attention, Jade found herself smiling, listening, and letting a small part of her own vulnerability show. She discovered that people yearned to connect. They wanted reasons to be hopeful. Her art was becoming the catalyst for those connections. Sometimes Jade couldn't believe how far she'd come from those nights spent quietly painting in secret. She still worried about negative opinions, but whenever someone made a snide or dismissive remark, she reminded herself that it was impossible to please everyone. The paintings weren't about achieving universal approval. They were about giving voice to kindness and reminding the community of its own warmth. Without her fear overshadowing her, she came to see that for every negative comment, there were countless messages of encouragement, gratitude, and joy. Those positive voices had formed a shield around her efforts. The community center mural took weeks to complete. On the final day, Jade stood on a short ladder listening to Miss Frances and Al joke about youthful escapades in their day. Ross, leaning against the building, watched with a confident grin, ready to move the ladder or hand her another brush if needed. Jade added the last details, tiny birds in flight across the top of the mural, an homage to her earliest creation. Each bird carried a tiny message of love scrawled in letters only visible up close. Children from the neighborhood reached out to touch the painted wings, giggling in delight. Their parents would read the hidden messages, smiling softly as they traced the painted letters. When Jade stepped off the ladder and turned to admire her work, emotion overwhelmed her. It wasn't just the bright shapes and colors dancing across the wall, it was the sense that something had fundamentally shifted in her life. She had dared to share her voice with an entire town. She had transformed lonely nights of introspection into an open display of harmony. And in the process, she'd discovered that people were kinder and more supportive than she usually gave them credit for. She spent the next few days recovering from the painting spree, nursing sore arms and paint-stained fingers. One afternoon, the front desk volunteer at the community center called to invite her to a small unveiling ceremony. "It's just a little celebration," she said. "Local families, council members, a few reporters maybe. They want to thank you." Jade's immediate reaction was panic. Public gatherings, speaking in front of others, cameras, yet she also knew that to continue growing as an artist and as a person, she had to say yes. The day of the unveiling dawned bright and cloudless. Jade arrived a bit early, wearing a paint-splattered apron around her waist like a shield. People started gathering, the mayor, who offered a friendly wave, a handful of local journalists, some of the staff from the center, and plenty of curious community members. The mural looked radiant in the morning sun, the gentle hues popping against the building's white exterior. Children pointed excitedly to their favorite parts, some mimicking the poses of the figures portrayed. When the mayor invited her to speak, Jade's heart performed the same frantic acrobatics it always did when she was the center of attention. But a sense of calm quickly ensued as she spotted Miss Frances, Ross the security guard, and Al in the crowd. They smiled at her, their eyes brimming with pride. She cleared her throat and began, voice trembling at first. "I used to view painting as a way to hide from life," she said. "I was shy, afraid to share my thoughts or feelings openly. But along the way, I realized painting is also a way to connect, to show that we're all capable of more kindness and compassion than we sometimes believe. I was scared when I started painting murals in secret. I never imagined I'd be here today with so many wonderful people. Thank you for supporting this vision." Her words earned gentle applause. Some people dabbed at their eyes. Then the mayor moved to hand her a small plaque bearing her name and the words, "In recognition of art that builds community." Jade's cheeks flamed. Had her secret identity really become this public? Yet the moment also shone with a quiet joy that erased so much of her decades-long worry. She smiled, accepted the plaque, and let herself feel proud. In the weeks after the unveiling, Jade continued painting murals, but this time she did so out in the open. She worked on a playful scene at the local elementary school featuring children of different backgrounds playing together in a makeshift treehouse. She collaborated with a group of local teens on a mural at a skate park, ensuring their own visions of respect and camaraderie were portrayed. Along the way, Jade's confidence grew. She didn't become less introverted, but she became braver, more at ease with sharing her perspective. Community members approached her with ideas, some wanting to highlight environmental stewardship, others hoping to spotlight local heroes. Each new proposal pushed her to expand her craft and experiment with new styles. She didn't always say yes. She only took on projects that aligned with the central idea of weaving kindness into the town's daily tapestry. But the process of consultation, the shared excitement with neighbors, the collective smiles at each final unveiling, these were the real rewards that helped her keep going, even on days when the old anxiety resurfaced. One warm evening, Jade took a walk around town by herself, revisiting her earliest murals. She paused at the wall behind the grocery store where she had first painted two pairs of outstretched hands. The rough bricks held signs of her initial nervous brushstrokes, the unsteady lines that might have betrayed her timid heart. Yet the mural still had life. Its colors were slightly faded, but the image of those hands reaching out to one another seemed more relevant than ever. A mother and her daughter happened to walk by, and the little girl squealed at the sight of the painting. "Look at that, Mommy!" she cried, tugging at her mother's hand. "Those hands are together, like friends helping each other." The mother nodded, smiling at her daughter. Jade, unnoticed in the shadow of the alley, felt tears prick at her eyes again. Then the pair walked on, leaving Jade with a lingering sense of fulfillment. Even if no one ever knew who had first painted that mural, it was still communicating a silent message of kindness and compassion to those who passed by. And that, Jade realized, was enough. What began as an isolated act of creative courage had blossomed into a community-wide reminder of empathy. Jade had uncovered a part of herself she never thought possible, that she could be strong, she could inspire, she could speak through color and line in a way that moved people. She had also unlocked a shared truth within her neighbors. They were eager to be moved, to be reminded of the goodness around them. It only took a few murals of warmth and hope to help them reflect it back. On her way home, clutching the small plaque in her hand, Jade allowed herself a moment of stillness. The town felt changed. It wasn't that every conflict vanished, but a fresh spirit of kindness drifted through the streets. She saw it in small gestures, in a teenage boy helping a senior lift a heavy basket, in a local baker offering a free loaf to a hungry passerby. Her murals might have played only a small part in the bigger picture, but she knew that every ounce of positivity counted. The shy artist had found her voice not by shouting over the din of life, but by painting the quiet truths that everyone could relate to. And though Jade still valued her solitude and the soft hush of her makeshift home studio, she knew she was no longer alone. The walls she adored painting on belonged to the community, and so did the message of compassion. With every new project, every handshake, and every color-filled moment spent with volunteers, Jade bridged the gap between her private world and the wider one. Her fear lessened, replaced by the knowledge that courage isn't the absence of anxiety, but the decision to act in spite of it. There would always be more walls, larger projects, and new challenges ahead, but Jade felt ready, or at least willing, to try. Spreading images of kindness across the town, she discovered, had gently healed parts of her she hadn't realized were broken. This was her art. This was her courage, to show up for the dream of a more compassionate place. Brush in hand, heart trembling yet open. And in doing so, she had created a living tapestry of kindness that seemed boundless, reaching new hearts every day, one mural at a time.